gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is At the Helm Sports. I am your host, Derek Helm. Thank you for joining me for episode 160. Please be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave those 5-star reviews. I know by the numbers that most of you are listening on either basically Apple or Spotify. So I know you have YouTube on your phone. Just go over real quick. Go to At the Helm Sports. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Like a video. It's the giving season. Give me a little gift. I'd appreciate it. But if you are watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and down in the comment section, let me know what is your favorite game this week outside of Buffalo and Detroit, because we're going to dive into the Week 15 main slate, and I would say Buffalo Detroit is definitely going to be a popular one. So let me know, what other games are you looking at? Is there anyone that stands out to you? Because I do think that might be the key to the slate this week is finding something outside of that game. Obviously, it has the highest total that we've seen all year, so you probably want some pieces of it. But are there any other games that stand out to you? I'll get into what I like this week because I do think that that's a good place to start. I think there's some games that we can just cross off right off the bat. We have a 12-game slate, so a little bit more than what we've had. Obviously, no teams on bye. So I do think that there are some game environments and maybe even some weather concerns now that we're getting later in the year where we can just look at some of these games and just go, nope, and just absolutely cross it off. So we might as well just dive right into it. If we dive into the Week 15 slate, as I said, 12 games. Number one on the slate, we have Washington at New Orleans. Now, this is one I wouldn't say I would cross off completely, but some concerns here. Washington, 7.5 point favorites on the road. 43.5 is the total. Now, I actually do like Washington quite a bit here. I don't know if I want to bet the 7.5. It's definitely a possibility. I might take an alt line on them, put them in an alt line parlay, maybe a teaser. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm probably going to have some part of Washington in some sort of bet this week. I do like them. With no Carr, I mean, New Orleans has looked terrible offensively, basically since they lost Shaheed, and now that they've lost Taysom Hill and Olave, it's a disaster. Kamara, sick, hasn't been practicing, so that's an absolute disaster. So not really much I would like from the New Orleans side. Don't know if it's going to be Hayner or Rattler, but either way, I don't really think it matters. Jaden Daniels, you can definitely make a case for. I think this could be a good spot for him. New Orleans defense has not been good. Obviously, if you're playing him, you probably want to pair him with Terry McLaurin. 7,200, though, it gets pretty expensive. So if I was playing McLaurin, I don't think he's one of those wide receivers that gets uber targeted and is going to have 8 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown. It's probably 2 long bombs. Maybe he scores twice. So if that's the case, you probably want to pair him with Daniels and then hope that maybe most of Daniels' passing production goes to McLaurin and then maybe he gets some extra rushing. So that would probably be the way that I would attack it there. I do like Brian Robinson quite a bit here, 6,200. We're going to go through the slate. There's a lot of good running back plays. So it's I think that might be the key to the slate here is, finding the best way to play the Buffalo Detroit game, finding another game to maybe target, and then figuring out which one of these running backs, because quarterback and running back this week, there is a plethora of guys that you can play. And I do think that Brian Robinson at 6,200 is a good play. New Orleans has been terrible defensively, especially against the run. So he could potentially fall in the end zone twice here. And we haven't really seen huge ceiling games from him. So maybe that's a little bit concerning, but it probably keeps his ownership down a little bit too. So as of right now, I think I'm going to have him in the player pool. But as I said, there's so many good running backs this week that if you didn't want to go there, I get it. There might be some better plays. As far as the New Orleans side, as I said, Kamara dealing with an illness, 7,700 for him. If one of these terrible quarterbacks is there, how good is this offense going to be? Can they even score? So I really don't think I would love it. If for some reason Kamara can't go, you can make a case for Kendre Miller just because he's 4,500. Wouldn't need a ton to pay off. So that would maybe be in consideration just as a value play here. But as I said, with how good some of the running back plays could be, that's a pretty big opportunity cost there, even though he's only 4,500. Jawan Johnson also is questionable here, but as long as he's healthy, I think at 3,400, he should be involved enough that he's potentially a play at tight end here if you wanted to fill out your tight end spot. But most likely, if I was stacking Daniels, it would be McLaurin, maybe a Brian Robinson, and that would basically be it. I'd play Robinson as a one-off and not bring anybody back on New Orleans or go with the Daniels stack. Next, we have Dallas at Carolina. This one, I didn't really want to like anything in it, but I actually think there are some playable pieces here. 43 is the total, so not crazy. I don't think you have to go out of control with a game stack here. Carolina is actually favored by 3, which they've looked pretty good lately. Actually, kind of hung around with Philly for a little bit last week, but I could see Dallas just coming in here and beating them. And I'm actually thinking about potentially betting Dallas. Now, obviously, Dallas hasn't been too great in their own right, but I think you can make a case for Rico Dowdle this week, and I think a lot of people will. I actually expect him to be pretty popular. At only 6,100, he is the guy in this backfield. He's getting a little bit of work in the passing game as well. So I think it's a really good price for the role that he has. And against the Carolina defense, he has some upside in this game. So I definitely think he's a good play. CD Lamb, 7,300, I think because of the price tag, probably doesn't see a lot of ownership. So he's definitely in play here as well. I wouldn't play Cooper Rush or try and make a stack there. But if you wanted to go Dowdle or Lamb and then maybe bring it back and just use this as a skinny stack with someone on Carolina, I do think that's fine. Jake Ferguson is really cheap, only 3,800, very enticing, but they used a lot of Schoonmaker last week, and we've even seen Span Ford get involved. So I'm a little bit worried that Ferguson's not going to get a ton of work here, but at 3,800, you don't need much from him to pay off. So it's in consideration. On the Carolina side, obviously, unfortunately, Jonathan Brooks is out ACL again. That's just terrible for a young kid like that. 6,500 though for Chuba Hubbard. He's definitely in play here. Should get the workload. Dallas has not been good defensively, so I definitely think you can make a case to go there. And then Adam Thielen's actually been pretty involved here, so 5,400 I think is fine for him as well. So as I said, if you wanted to go with a skinny stack, CD Lamb in one of those two, or Dowdle in one of those two, and that actually could be a pretty good skinny stack here. Now, obviously, it gets a little expensive if you're going to CD Lamb, but 5,400 for Thielen isn't bad, and 6,500 for the workload Chuba gets is pretty good. So it's affordable. Next, we have KC at Cleveland. As I said, there's some games here that I think you can probably just write off. This is definitely one of them for me. KC 4-point favorites on the road, 43.5 is the total. We could potentially have some rain if it gets cold enough, maybe a little wintry mix or even some snow here in Cleveland. Just we know how KC wants to play. They're kind of a slower offense now, methodical. So I really don't like Mahomes. I really don't like a lot of the pass catchers, except for Travis Kelce, 5,700, just because of how cheap he is. Maybe he could have a pretty nice game to pay off that price, but not really loving the passing side of things. I actually am willing to go to Pacheco here this week. Played about a third of his snaps in his first game back, played 50% last week, got 14 carries. So he's ramping it up each week. You would expect that he would ramp it up a little bit more here. And as favorites on the road, especially if there's some crappy weather, 6K is not a bad price for Pacheco. I mean, we were paying more than that earlier in the year, and you would have to think each week that gets back here, he starts to look a little bit more healthy. And I could see them relying on him quite a bit. 14 carries last week, as I said. So if he's getting 15 carries against this Cleveland defense, I think you can make a case for it. As far as Cleveland goes, obviously it would be Jameis Stacks, but I'm not loving it against this KC defense. So it would probably more so be one-offs for me. Judy 6,200 now. KC has been a little more vulnerable lately against the pass, but I don't know that I love it at 6,200. If Tillman does come back, he's only 4,900, so maybe a little interest there. excuse me, just with how involved he's been. And then Njoku banged up, but 5,200 for him. I definitely think he would be in consideration here. So I don't necessarily love the skinny stack here. I probably would just play Pacheco by himself, or maybe pair him with the KC defense. But if you wanted to, you could definitely make a case for a Judy, Tillman, or Njoku. As I said, I'm not really going to chase Winston stacks here, but I think those three pass catchers are definitely in play, and Pacheco would be my favorite from the Kansas City side. Next, we have Miami at Houston. As I said, finding an alternate game that could potentially get there, this might be it. And it could maybe get a little popular. 46.5 is the total. Houston 3-point favorites at home. I kind of like Miami in the spot. I just, Houston has not looked great, but Tua has looked incredible. And Houston can get a little bit of pressure, but haven't been great against the pass. So I think Tua is definitely in play here, and you have options to pair him with. Achan 7,900, involved enough in the passing game. Tyreek Hill made a little resurgence here at 7,400. Waddle banged up again as usual, but 5,700 if he gets a clean bill of health, I think is still a good price for him. And then Jonnu Smith 5,400. So I think you pair two pass catchers with Tua and bring it back with a Nico Collins or a Joe Mixon, and you got a pretty nice stack there. So it can get expensive, especially if you're using Achan or Tyreek in a Tua stack and trying to bring it back with a $7,800 Joe Mixon or an $8,100 Nico Collins. So just got to keep that in mind. You would have to find some value somewhere, but I do think that this is a game that could definitely get there. And if you wanted to make a case just for going Tua stacks and maybe not bringing it back with a Houston just because of the price, and maybe paying up somewhere else, I think that would be fine too. But if Waddle is healthy and you wanted to go Tua, Waddle, and Jonnu, and then that's very affordable, and then you could bring it back with a Mixon or a Nico Collins there. I I could see some people making a case for Tank Dell just in the game stack. I would probably only use it in game stacks. I just he hasn't been great, hasn't been heavily involved, so probably just Nico and Mixon for me here, but definitely have some interest in this game. Next, we have the Jets at Jacksonville. Now, this one looks pretty ugly, but 46.5 is the total. 3-point favorites on the road are the Jets. I told myself I wasn't going to bet the Jets anymore this year, but I mean, Jacksonville is horrendous. I get the Jets have been terrible as well and can't win a game, but Jacksonville is not good. Mac Jones has not been good. So it's going to take a lot for me not to bet that three, and we'll see. But I do think that Aaron Rodgers is actually in play here. 5,400 is a pretty cheap price for him. Obviously, we saw him get over 300 and throw a couple touchdowns last week. So I do actually like that quite a bit. I don't know that I would double stack him, but if you wanted to go Rodgers and Wilson or Rodgers and Adams and just be on your way, I think that's actually a pretty affordable, nice little stack there. Jacksonville is absolutely terrible, especially defending the pass, but just defensively, period. So I definitely could see one of these receivers getting there. So if you didn't want to play Rodgers and you just wanted to play a Wilson or an Adams, I think that's fine as well. But I do definitely have some interest in Rodgers being as cheap as he is with one of these wide receivers. And then I'm going to say it looks like Breece Hall's not going to go again, not practicing, and with nothing on the line for the season, why would you risk it here? Braylon Allen, 5,400 after letting people down last week, and it was mainly Isaiah Davis. I could see people going to Davis, but they basically split the workload. And Allen against this Jacksonville defense, I mean, if he gets used around the goal line and he scores a touchdown or maybe even two, I don't think anybody's going to be on it this week. And I think it's actually even a better spot this week than it was last week's. And he only went up, what, $400 in price. So I actually have some interest in Allen this week as a little flop leg play there. As far as the Jacksonville side goes, not great. But Brian Thomas Jr., 5,800 back-to-back games with double-digit targets. So has some big play upside. Don't know if Sauce is going to be able to go, but this Jets defense has been reeling and really not too great recently defending the pass or defending the run for that matter. But I like Brian Thomas quite a bit. So if I did go with a Aaron Rodgers stack and then wanted to bring it back with somebody, you go Rodgers, Devontae, and bring it back with a Brian Thomas Jr., I think that is absolutely in play this week. Next, we have Baltimore at the Giants. Now, this one is pretty interesting from the standpoint that Baltimore is now laying 16 points, 16-point favorite on the road in New York or in New Jersey in the Meadowlands. 42.5 is the total. So Locke looks like he's going to be out. DeVito is going to be starting. It's a shit show on the Giants side. Really don't think you can go anywhere there. Malik Neighbors is banged up. I could see people making a case for him because Baltimore against the pass, but they've actually been a little bit better recently defending the pass. So for me, I think Derrick Henry is very popular this week. The whole DeHenber narrative and him just being the Yeti in December and being a huge favorite on the road, you would have to think he's going to get some opportunities to score some touchdowns here. So I love Henry this week. I will absolutely be playing Henry. But I do also think that makes Lamar Jackson a little bit of leverage. 8,300 being as expensive as he is. I could see people paying up for Josh Allen just for $100 more instead of Lamar. And I mean, they have a huge team total. They're expected to blow out the Giants. It could absolutely be Lamar that gets them there. And, Henry could still be okay, but it's very similar to last week with Philly and the Saquon and Hurts situation. Hurts obviously had a good game. He ended up not really getting there because of what Allen did, but I could see a similar thing this week where Henry has a good game, but at 8,300 maybe isn't necessarily needed. And I could see Lamar just absolutely destroying this slate and destroying the Giants defense. Zay Flowers is absolutely affordable at 6K. So he would probably be my preferred play with Lamar. And then I think you can make a case to play Zay Flowers on his own. Also, he could be a bit of leverage off of a chalky Henry. So that could be your exposure to this Baltimore offense, who as I said, have a high team total. So you definitely probably want some pieces of Baltimore. Andrews, I would probably only play with Lamar. I don't love him as a one-off tight end. The one thing the Giants actually have done well this year is defend the tight end. It's one of the only things they've actually done well defensively. So I do worry about him a little bit, but I would be fine with it in Lamar stacks. Next, we have Cincinnati at Tennessee. Now, this is another one I keep going back and forth on. I'm kind of leaning towards not playing much in this game. 46.5 is the total, so not terrible. 5-point favorites are the Bengals on the road. I just, from a Tennessee standpoint, I don't know how much they can do here. Pollard is pretty banged up, hasn't been practicing, so that is concerning. If he is healthy and can play, I think he's an okay play against this Cincy defense. If he can't go, Tajay Spears is only 4,300, so probably even a better play than if Kendre Miller were to open up at 45. So I think Spears could potentially be in play, but hasn't really looked that great this year. And then Calvin Ridley, I would say, from the Tennessee side would be the only other play for me. You can make a case for Burrow stacks. He's currently listed as questionable and limited at practice, but looks like he's going to be fine. If you wanted to go Burrow, Chase, 7,300 for Burrow, 8,400 for Chase, gets pretty expensive. Obviously, with Burrow, most of the time I would want to pair him with two receivers or two pass catchers. So it would probably be Yoshi Voss at 3,800 and one of Chase or Higgins. I could see them maybe overcorrecting a little bit and trying to get Higgins a little involved after he kind of disappeared last week. But I think Higgins is an okay play at 6,800. I don't know if I want to pay the 8,400 for Chase. And I'm just probably not going to get there on Burrow stacks this week. But Chase Brown, I think, is a great play as well. 7,200 for him is a good price. Just heavily involved in the passing game and the running game, has looked explosive as favorites with an okay total. I think he has some touchdown upside here. So I like Chase Brown quite a bit here and actually probably will play quite a bit of him. As far as Yoshi Voss goes, I would only play him in Burrow stacks. Cheap price, 3,800. It seems kind of enticing to get some value there, but it would only be in Burrow stacks for me. And as I said, I'm probably not playing Burrow stacks, so probably not going to be playing him there. But that's all I'm looking at there. Now we head to the late set of games. We have 5 in the late window. First of which is New England at Arizona. 46 is the total here. Arizona 6-point favorites at home. I'm interested to see how popular the Arizona side gets here. I don't know that they will, just because there's so many games in this late window that are enticing. I have some interest in Kyler. He hasn't been great recently, hasn't been running a lot, but New England's defense is not good. So I could definitely see him paying off here at only 6K. And then you pair him with obviously McBride, but McBride is currently banged up a little bit, questionable. He should be okay, but 6K for him, I think, is fine just with how much work he gets. You could even make a case to maybe go double tight end, use him in your flex, and go with a cheaper tight end to save some money here. But I do like McBride, and then Harrison is only 5,500. I know he hasn't been good. Him and Kyler really haven't gotten on the same page often this year, but at 5,500, I mean, if you look at some of the guys in the range of that price range, it doesn't take that much against this New England defense for him to pay off that price. So I would definitely have some interest there. I don't like him as a one-off. It probably would be more so with Kyler stacks, but I have some interest in Harrison this week. And then Connor, 6,600, still getting the work. Hasn't really been getting the touchdowns, but as heavy favorites at home, you know, this offense hasn't been scoring a lot lately. Seattle's actually improved tremendously defensively. So that was 2 of their last 3 games. Minnesota, not bad defensively, but, you know, Arizona was able to put up some yardage on them, just really wasn't able to capitalize scoring wise. So I could see them putting up a good amount of points in this game. So I definitely have some interest in the Arizona side here on a couple fronts. As far as the New England side goes, Ramondre at 5,900, you could make a case for. With the amount of running back plays that are on the slate, I'm not going to get there. Hunter Henry, price is creeping up a little bit, but at tight end for 4,300, I think he's involved enough. Basically, you're guaranteed 7 targets every week. So I think it's fine there, but probably a better cash play. And I'd much more be interested in the Arizona side. Next, we have Indy at Denver. Now, this one isn't necessarily a cross off for me, but I might just cross off Indy altogether. 44 is the total. Denver 4-point favorites at home. Not a ton that I love in this one. Probably Bo Nix, 6,300. Pair him with Sutton, 6,600. That's it. I do worry. I don't think I would love Sutton by himself as a one-off at 6,600. Maybe. I mean, he's been productive enough, but I probably do like him paired a little bit more with Nix, and maybe Nix can propel Sutton, and then maybe he just brings along one of these other pass catchers. Obviously, they have no running game to speak of, so I do have a little interest in Nix and Sutton. Maybe Sutton as a one-off, but not looking to stack this game, really. I know Downs is back at 5,100. Maybe he would be the only one that I would really make a case for, but probably just Sutton and Bo Nix for me. You could even make a case for just playing Nix by himself, but I think Sutton is affordable, and I'd probably want him tied to Nix. Next, obviously, we have the game. Buffalo at Detroit. 54.5 is the total. Highest total we've seen this year. Detroit, 2.5-point favorites at home. Let's spend some time on this one because I do think that this is going to be really important. Josh Allen, after what everybody saw last week, if anybody's paying up a quarterback, it's probably going to be for him, 8,500. I could see him just being played naked, and obviously that is an option. people might want to go to Shakir after what they saw last week. 5,300 for Amari Cooper. If he doesn't get popular, I actually love him in this game as a one-off, as a Josh Allen piece. So he was involved pretty good, had a pretty good game last week, and against this Detroit defense, I definitely think that he could have a pretty good game here. So if you even wanted to go with Goff stacks and have Cooper as one of your bringbacks, I actually think that makes sense. So definitely have some interest in Allen. You pair him with Shakir, pair him with Cooper. Looks like Coleman's going to be back, so it makes it a little bit difficult to know who to go with. But Shakir Cooper would probably be my favorite, and then James Cook, actually, if Allen does get popular, I do not expect people to go to James Cook. And he has been very boom bust this year, but there has been some boom games. And at only 6,800, I could definitely see him having a good game here. So another great piece if you're stacking up the Lion side and you wanted to bring it back, or if you wanted to go with a game stack with one of the wide receivers and Cook and not play the Allen, I think that gets you very different as well. So just some things to keep in mind there. I do think Goff is in play here, 6,500. So in the dome, at home, Buffalo's defense, meh. Obviously, seeing what they gave up last week, I do expect a lot of people to go to this Lions side. Amon-Ra is under 8K at only 7,600. So Goff to Amon-Ra, definitely in play here. Jamison Williams, only 5,600. So he's definitely in play. You could pair both of them with Goff or Laporta with Goff. I will say with Laporta, 4,400. He's been okay lately, but I don't like him as a one-off. I'd probably only play him with Goff. Buffalo actually is one of the better teams defending the tight end, so I do worry a little bit about him in this one. My preferred Goff pairing would probably be Amon-Ra and Jamison. Obviously, Tim Patrick can randomly score 2 touchdowns and annoy you here, so that does throw a little wrinkle in things. But the 2 running backs are obviously in play for Detroit. Every week they just get there. 7,500 and 7,000 for Gibbs and Montgomery. So you could take your pick there. A lot of ways to pair up this game. I mean, if you wanted to go with a Gibbs, Jamison Williams, James Cook, I mean, that's fine. I think you can actually make a case to, if this game really is, a shootout similar to what we saw last week with the Rams and Bills, going Allen, Cooper, Keon Coleman, Amon-Ra, and then one of the running backs, I think that could actually make sense. So just, basically going all in on this game definitely is in play here. So a lot of things to consider here, but I do think that the bulk, if not all of my lineups, will have pieces of this game. Skinny stack wise, I think my favorite would probably be Amon-Ra, James Cook. And just because if you're only playing 2 pieces of this game, I guess you could make a case for maybe one of the Detroit running backs and Josh Allen. Obviously, that's a little expensive, but I think you can definitely find some value on this slate to make that work. I do think you can get a large amount of the scoring from that standpoint, but I do think that would also be the most popular side. So if you wanted to get a little bit different, I could see Amon-Ra and James Cook being a nice little skinny stack here. If you didn't want to just completely focus on this game, let's say you do like maybe Miami and Houston and you want to make that your main stack, and then you could use some pieces from this game. So just a couple strategies, couple things to keep in mind on ways you could attack this game. But next game, we have Tampa Bay at the Chargers. Kind of had some interest in this game, but a little bit worried about it now. I think you can make a case for Baker at 6,400. Mike Evans is banged up, though, 7,100. McMillan probably actually gets a little popular here at 3,700. So I'm staying away there. I would only play him in Baker stacks. But if for some reason Evans and Shepard can't go, then, obviously Jalen McMillan becomes a pretty good play at that point. I wouldn't say he's a lock, but at 3,700, if he's the only guy for some reason with Shepard and Evans out, it would definitely be in play, definitely a lock in cash. On the Chargers standpoint, as I said, I had interest in this game, but I don't know how much I really want to stack it up. Herbert is banged up, the ankle injury, the bruise, so that's concerning. I do think he's going to play just because he is a tough son of a bitch. So 5,900 for him would have been a great price, but don't know if Ladd is going either. And if Ladd's not going, I wouldn't want to play Herbert and really wouldn't want to stack up this game. If Ladd doesn't go, I do have some interest in Josh Palmer, 4,600. Got targeted quite a bit there. So he could be a cheap little wide receiver piece if you wanted to. If you wanted to skinny stack this game and go McMillan and Palmer, maybe that's a cheap little skinny stack to get you to able to pay up in some other spots. So something to consider there. And then the last game we have on the slate is Pittsburgh at Philadelphia. Now, this one probably really not going to go crazy with. 42.5 is the total. So probably a little bit of a slog of a game. 5.5 is Philly's favored, 5.5 at home. Now, Philly has run the ball a ton over expectation, so they tend to speed the game up a little bit with how much they run. Saquon's obviously always in play. I don't love him against this Pittsburgh defense at $8,600. Same thing with Hurts at 8K. Just I'd much rather go up to Lamar or Allen. Now, maybe that makes Hurts an incredible play. And if he does have a vintage Hurts game, then you're sitting pretty because most people are going to go up most likely to Lamar or Allen if they are paying up. So it could make Hurts a good play. Russell Wilson, I want nothing to do with. Just with no Pickens, this offense does not look good. The Eagles are pretty good against the run, so I don't like the Pittsburgh running backs. And just for that reason, I could see this being a low-scoring, slow-paced game. So make a case for Barkley, but I'd probably rather just play one of these receivers as a one-off. A.J. Brown, squeaky wheel narrative, 8K, not a terrible price for him. Obviously, he's always been a boom-bust guy, and it's been bust mainly here recently, but with him complaining, I could definitely see them getting him some extra targets, and anytime you target him, he's a big play waiting to happen, so that's fine. And then Devontae Smith is only 5,500. As I said, Marvin Harrison, same price. I have interest in Harrison. Devontae Smith is a better receiver, at least right now in their careers, than Harrison, so definitely have some interest there, but that's basically all I'm looking at here. So that's our slate for week 15. So I think figuring out what to do with that Buffalo-Detroit game, finding some other games to focus on and stack and finding a little bit of value here is definitely going to be the key. Got a lot of good quarterback plays, like a lot of good running back plays. Might be a 3 running back week. Maybe getting different instantly is just by playing 4 wide receivers. So just something to keep in mind there. But I think Buffalo Detroit is definitely the key, and then finding your stacks elsewhere to fill out your lineups. But that's going to do it for this week. As always, check out thehelmsports.com. We'll have all the bets up in the My Bets tab. Have my cash right up over there. TheMadLabMMA.com. Everything, as soon as I make it, goes in the Discord. Excuse me. Dying here at the end of this podcast. Also have the Contrarian Corner up over there at Mad Lab. Had the Josh Allen Puka last week. That was my number one bullet point, was targeting that game. So definitely smashed on that. It was nice to actually have the 4 o'clock games go in my favor for once. So that was fun. But that's going to do it for this week. As always, thank you for listening. Greatly appreciated. I am your host, Eric Helm. And remember,
just have fun out there.